All right, so turning back to investments then, to actually people who are buying a piece of your film. What do you find that investors are looking for? As your, whether it's as you start, let's start with independent film. Okay.
Always.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
So for me, when I'm pitching for funding to investors for any sort of project, you know, it's important to have a package together. And I think when I say package, I probably think of it differently than Bobby does, I'm sure. But when I say package, I'm saying that you have some sort of talent or some sort of executive producer that has some sort of marketability. All right, so their name and their attachment to the project has value, and you know, on a smaller independent scale, it may not be as big as the A-list names in Hollywood that are bringing in, you know, 10 to 15 million, but at least it's someone who has value. There was a film that shot here a few months ago called Hope Springs Eternal, and they had a bunch of YouTube stars as their leads in the film because they had millions and millions of followers, and they're able to leverage that from day one for marketing purposes, which was attractive to the investors who were putting money into it. So that's really interesting. I can't speak to their acting quality. I heard mixed reviews, but let's hope the film turns out well. So I think for me too, especially an independent film, or I approach a lot of my films where I'm the connector kind of between the creatives and the investors with more of a grassroots marketing campaign, hence a lot of the crowdfunding, like Ted said. But it's really important for them to know why they're investing in it and why they should. And a lot of my films, while most of my work is in narrative and not documentary, there's still a bigger reason for them to invest than just support me. It's support this project, support this story, because this is a conversation that needs to be had right now. And I will always start my pitch with that, and then I will bring in the business or the package or the digital distribution plan. You know, we recently had a show on Netflix called The Jams, which was independently financed through the New York Television Festival in the Orchard. And it's kind of this new, it was really cool, no money, but really cool to be a part of that and see kind of how it was put together. So I think for me, it's always about knowing why they should invest and what makes the story good, and the script is king. Content is king. Bobby.
So, I look at it a little, I agree, I agree. So, when I look at, let's say an independent movie, $1 million, 500 grand, $1 million, 2 million, whatever it is. And I've made a career out of raising money, right? This is what our company does. Jenny Napier, who's back here, who's been with us for 9 years, I just have to give her props, she's the best. Came in from LA, moved to Chicago, throws her ass off. But you have to know the type of investor you're going after. If you're going after a private equity fund, they want to see a financial package. If you're going after a bank, they want to see a private equity, they want to see a certain package. If you're going after getting an insurance bond or whatever else, getting a bank involved, what is the criteria they're going to need in order to sit there and close that bank loan? If you're going after a family office or a high net worth individual or somebody that just made a couple $1 million and so they're high on life and they think this is great, I'm going to go and I'm just divorced and I'm going to...
They want to hang out with Jessica Biel?
They want to hang out with Jessica Biel. And I've told you a couple of stories. You know, but they've just gotten divorced and they've got a couple $1 million in the bank and they just want to get laid, right? Whatever it is. And then you have to know how to pitch to that person. And the mandate is going to be different based on who you're pitching to. And we've had to do it across the board. And I can tell you this, when I'm talking to that high net worth guy who's bringing his girlfriend around, that's called Asia, okay, you know exactly what's going on. And you play into you sit there and you tell them exactly what they want to hear. You're going to be the executive producer. You can't wait to be on set. Versus if you're talking to a bank, it's an entirely different conversation. It's pure numbers and risk mitigation. So my biggest thing with Chicago is that while I'm so excited about the people that are here, that are working their tails off to make this work, and they're doing it, which 5 years ago, 6 years ago, didn't exist when I was here, is do they know the right questions to ask based on who they're talking to? And as a producer, you have to wear many hats, whether it's talking to talent, to attorneys, to agents, to managers, to business managers, to unions, to bond companies, insurance companies, whoever it is. You have to know how to play that game, and you have to navigate those waters. So whether you're pitching any type of investor, whoever it may be, you better make sure you have the right hat on, because if not, you're done.
Bobby's great because he can wear a lot of those hats. And but one of the things I learned, I went out to AFM for the first time a number of years ago, and there's a great spiel which really resonated with me, which is the reality is movie stars sell movies, and whether you realize that or not, I mean, the script is sort of who cares. When you go to sell a movie to a foreign territory, it's a distributor who's going to want to know what's the genre and who's in it. That's it. And based on that, they're going to make you a bid, and that's most of the financing for your fund, for your film. And so when you talk about traditional film, independent film distribution, or any film distribution, movie stars has been the talent attached, whether the director maybe, but really the actors. That is what's going to sell the project.
And that's how I've made my career.
And Bobby was a pioneer of saying, let's look at the data behind that. Let's put real numbers. Let's not just think about it, or some guy in a room knows. Let's actually look at the data. I think that's a big part of it. I think today, and in Chicago, the opportunity of this town today, and what I'm interested in, and when I talk about content as an asset class, for independent film, that's still the answer. A movie star is going to sell that movie. Now you can get lucky, and there are people in this town who casted a lead role in a film, and when they casted that person, they were nobody. And in the process of producing that movie to releasing that movie, that nobody became a somebody. And all of a sudden, that film that they made becomes a huge success because they had somebody in it. That can happen. That's getting lucky. I think what's really exciting, though, in sort of what I call the digital renaissance era, where we are now, is
DRE.
should we coin this?
I think we should
Trademark that. But I think the reality is you no longer the way to monetize a movie 10, 15 years ago was theatrical distribution. That was the only way you were going to get your money out. Today, you can do a lot of different things. I get really excited about transmedia properties. I get really excited about a low-budget independent film that also has a web series attached to it that could maybe become an episodic thing. And you can use that franchise in a lot of different ways. You don't have to put tens of $millions into it to get there. And that might be less dependent on having Brad Pitt in your movie or your web series, obviously. And so I think that, but it all comes down to knowing what your audience is, knowing how you're going to reach that audience. And I think the trend is away from having Brad Pitt and Taylor Swift in your movie, and it's towards going after a really niche audience that you know how to reach in a very authentic way. And I think that that's a really exciting opportunity for lower budget content.
Coincidentally, I would 100% agree with you. So even from when I started, it's completely a different model right now, and Ted is 100% right. And I think that's even more interesting to business. So you gotta remember, so there's something called percenters in Hollywood, right? So my agent gets 10%, my manager gets 10%, my lawyer gets 5%, my business manager gets 5%. So I'm giving 30% off the top. So they really, at the end of the day, they're business people. They want to make money off of me, right?
They want to make $100 million movies.
They want to make big movies. But they're looking at it very differently today, and that's where Chicago is so attractive and interesting. And the talent pool here is really unique in that I think that you have to look at the multi-revenue asset classes of a movie, and I use asset classes like it's a Wall Street term, but it is, because it translates across. And you can actually go get talent by creating very interesting structures where they own a piece of that IP, that intellectual property, the entire package, in case it were to get triggered into an episodic actual TV show versus a web series or whatever else. And that's where you can actually get talent where they make their quote in their movie or their TV show for 6, 5, 10, whatever the number is, and then they come do this for an executive producer and ownership of something. They're going to take a big piece, but either way, I mean, that's where it's attractive and really interesting. And I'm hoping Chicago gets really behind it.
Yeah, so especially in the episodic sphere, it's been really interesting over the past few years. Chicago has had a couple of key successes that have had a similar model in this sense. So Teachers, which is now a show on TV Land, was previously a web series with a really, really popular all-female comedy group here in Chicago. So they produced it locally, and they did a great job, and they were able to leverage the comedy and the fans of that particular comedy group to produce a web series that got so many views that TV Land came in and said, hey, I want to be a part of this, and Allison Brie signed on as the executive producer. You know, and I think Ted and I were talking about this earlier in a meeting, is like, and I'm going to start thinking about this more, but that concept, that transmedia concept, and thinking of that as a franchise in a different way than you might think of a Marvel movie as a franchise. Whereas you're trying to leverage different audiences, and you can make a series that gets a lot of views and then take that next step to make it bigger the next time. So I think it's really interesting.
And I can tell you from a finance perspective, who everybody knows who Ryan Kavanaugh is, Relativity. So Ryan and I worked on that model together, and ultimately he just got the money a little bit faster than I did.
How's he doing today, Bobby?
Well, he's actually just got out of bankruptcy, so he's actually restructuring the company. But, I look at like kind of what he's doing, and I look at some of the financiers like LA Capital and some of these massive billion-dollar hedge funds that are behind them, who I consult for and whatever else, and they no longer talk about, well, we're a movie production company. Now they're talking about it's a multimedia company. I consulted for WME, where I'm repped at, and for Virgin. And when they were looking to sit there and go raise a couple $100 million, the most attractive thing about it wasn't the fact that they had domestic distribution or whatever else, and how many screens they could go buy out from, Lionsgate or Harvey or whoever it was that had to put deals. It was the fact that they had so many other ways to distribute that were so much bigger than anything on screen. And that's really what you have to consider. When you're looking at a model, it's not about saying, great, I want my name up on the screen, because, yeah, that's great, and, you're going to get a lot of praise and all the deal, but it's not going to make you money. And here's the thing, if you don't make the money back for your investors, you're not going to get your shot to make your second movie or whatever else you're trying to accomplish. And while we all want that gratification, you have to think a little bit bigger and a little bit further down the road than what can I do right now.
Mhm.